Hey, welcome into this Adobe Illustrator tutorial where we're going to talk about 10 tips. It's actually going to be 12 tips, but 10 or 12 tips that you are going to love. They're going to help with a whole wide variety of things here within Adobe Illustrator. We're going to talk about texts and building shapes and all sorts of different things like that. Hey, we've got a sponsor today. It's Envato Elements. If you haven't checked out Envato Elements, link is in the description. We're going to talk a little bit more about them later. Hint, they're awesome. And not just because they're sponsoring this channel. Hey, let's jump into Adobe Illustrator and check out these 10 or 12 tips that I think you're really going to enjoy right now. Alright, here we are in Adobe Illustrator for our first tip. This is quick. It's kind of more like a hotkey. We've got this artwork. It's from Envato Elements, by the way. We've got this artwork here, this little card, and there's some text here. Is this text going to export with our graphic, right? This white background is going to drop away. Well, if we use the hotkey Command-Shift-D, that is Control-Shift-D on the PC, you can drop away the white background, view everything with the transparent background, and in fact, you can see, yes, our text is there. It's white text, so we couldn't see it over the white background, but if we were to export this artwork, we would get this artwork, semi-transparent, the full-fledged artwork, and this white text with a transparent background right here from Adobe Illustrator. Command-Shift-D, Control-Shift-D on the PC. It's a great little tip. Okay, for tip number 2 here, I want to talk about the pen tool. So we grab our pen tool, we can just draw with a stroke. I don't want to fill here, any color works fine. Now let's say we're drawing and we just want to create sort of a smoothed out version of this little sketch here. So I would maybe begin down here, pull out a tangent handle, come up here across the chest, pull out another tangent handle here, but you can see part of the problem is going to be if I just go and now and begin trying to draw around his helmet, I need to hold down my Alt or Option key, grab this tangent handle, and then move it manually like this, and then I could come up here and move around the helmet, yada, yada, yada. There's actually a faster way to do this. So we begin with our line, our path, just like that. Then when we click and hold, we just look at the path that we're drawing, all right? Ignore the tangent handle we have. Focus, get the right angle. That's about right. But before we let go, hold down the Alt or Option key and you can move that tangent handle right away. So I'll say, hey, I want to move this to right here. That's about right. And then I'll come up here to somewhere around the top of the helmet and I would continue drawing my shape around like that. I can hold down my space bar and move my anchor point altogether and say, I really want to just pull this around even further, kind of like that. Then I can come down here and you can see that, I kind of had that handle pulled out too far. So I could undo that once again. I could pull out and I know that the tangent handle is out too far, so hold down Alt or Option again. Just suck the tangent handle in a little bit. Let me try that again. I messed that up. Suck the tangent handle in, let that go, and we can come down here to the base of the helmet, finish curving the helmet, and then hold down Alt or Option again and move the tangent handle out here so we can come out around his little jetpack, and then we would come down the back of the jetpack and just zip around his arm here, move this way just a little bit, as we finish up around his arm and maybe the bottom of the little pack. And using this technique, you can very quickly make the pen tool kind of work for you. So it's that double of holding down the Alt Option key to swing that tangent handle where you want it to go, and also use the space bar to move that anchor point before you commit your change. All right, on to tip number 3, and this one is really cool. We've got kind of another postcard situation here. Again, more artwork that you can grab from Envato Elements. Let's take our logo here, and we're just going to duplicate it. Hold down the Alt or Option key, drag out a copy of it. Cool. And then I'm going to ungroup it by going Object, Ungroup. Now we have the logo and the text. Well, see, I want my text to be the height of our shape. And ideally, what I want is the letter R to begin at the bottom of the square and perfectly appear or line up or be aligned with the top of this square. So how do we do this? Well, first and foremost, we can take our text here and we can come up here to Window, open up the character panel, type character, just like that. And then we have a bunch of different things, but there's this feature here in the hamburger menu called Show Font Height Options. Select that, and we get this little option here. And right now the font height option is the M box, right? It's just kind of this bounding box around the text. So if I were to say, hey, I want my type to be 200 point, it's going to measure from the top and bottom of our box here. We don't want that, of course, because we want the letter R to be exactly the height of our square. So what do? Well, we come into here and we say, hey, use the X height. This is the height of a lowercase letter. Now, it is the height from this baseline. So you can see how the letter A dips below the baseline. So be aware letters like O, and there are going to be certain letters, depending on the font as well, that are going to dip below your baseline. But it's measuring from the baseline to the top of your lowercase letters. Now, not like the lowercase I. It's going to be the main top line here, the sort of the top baseline. So we're going to go X height. We don't have caps here. So we're going to go baseline, and you can see that the height here, or the size of the font, just automatically updates and changes. But this isn't really what I need yet, because I don't know what height our square is. So we figured that out by selecting the square and looking up here. The height is 201.782. In fact, I can just double click this, Command or Control C to copy that, select on my text, and then double click here in the X height and just paste that in, hit enter or return. And we can see now the letter R is exactly the same height as our little logo. This is an incredibly useful little tip. In fact, I could take the logo here and I could just make it orange right here like he has in his suit. And all of a sudden we have, it's the same logo, but it's also kind of completely different. And just like that, we have it just lined up perfectly. So you can punch in and get your letters to be the exact height and size you want them to be. Really, really useful to have that in your little toolbox. All right, let's talk about our sponsor for today. It is Envato Elements. Envato is a subscription service. It's a huge library of assets that any designer, photographer, person who uses Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or even does video editing, you're gonna find this stuff useful. You sign up for a subscription. It is super duper affordable. It's a monthly subscription. You can go in there. They've got images, they've got brushes, they've got templates, they've got graphics, vector artwork. We're using stuff from theirs. In this tutorial right now, the graphics and some of the text that we're using came from Envato Elements. There are millions of assets that you can get, you can use. There's no limit on how much you can download. You can take it all if you want. Stock video, stock audio, sound effects, some website templates, all kinds of stuff. You gotta check them out. Use that free trial down in the description. Check them out, check them out, check them out. You're gonna love them. Tons of stuff. You're practically losing money if you don't sign up and subscribe to Envato Elements. And also, they're sponsoring this video. So thank you for checking out Envato Elements, and thank you to Envato Elements for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back into what we were working on. All right, on to tip number 4. We have our text here, Rainy Space Academy, or whatever RSC would stand for. And let's say we have our shape here, and we want to align these together. So of course you can select them, say, hey, I've got my alignment options in my properties panel. Let's go ahead and align them to the horizontal center, but it's not quite aligned properly, right? You can see it's a little funky. Well, Illustrator aligns again to the text box rather than the actual glyphs, the actual little pieces of type, the letters. We can change this here. So if we select these items, we can come to our align panel, right? Hit the hamburger menu, and down here, align to glyph bounds, we can choose point text. And when I do this now, we can say, hey, align to the top. And it's not going to align to the top of the bounding box, but rather to the top of our letters. Same thing if I align to the bottom or the center. So we can really, again, exert a lot of control over exactly how we're aligning without having to take all of our text and just convert it to outlines and make it shapes. So that little bump there, align to glyph bounds, point text, can be quite useful when you are aligning and working with text in Adobe Illustrator. Oh, and you know what? Before I go, one other quick, nice thing that you may not have turned on. Up here under View, you have this option now to snap to glyph. It's new-ish in Adobe Illustrator. And what it's going to do is, again, you don't have to convert your text to object or outlines, objects. They are kind of objects. But you can see here, I can move my shape in and I can click it right to the edge of the text. I can align it and zoom in a little bit more. I can align right to the top base, or the baseline here on the bottom, I should say, of our text. And we just align our shape perfectly just by dragging it over and letting it click to the text. And again, we can do that without having to convert our text to outlines. All right, on to the 5th tip. Oh yes, so we're going to talk about text on a path, or type on a path as Illustrator calls it. We have type on a path looping up above our little bicyclist, and type on a path down below. And you can see those layers reflected in our layers panel. Well, what happens if I want to move this in closer to the guy on the BMX bike, which we want to do? Well, you can select this. There's all kinds of options here where you can push and pull text and kind of do it manually, but you can also come to type on a path, and choose type on a path options. Here we have a few different things. I'm going to kind of ignore everything except align to path. And I'm going to say, hey, what does it look like if I say ascender? Of course, I want to check on preview. Interesting. That's actually kind of what I want. I wanted to bring the text inside of the path. What is descender? There's descender, and then baseline is going to be like that, and then center is just going to center the text on the path. I want to go ascender because I want to bring the text to the inside, and I'm going to hit OK. Cool. All right, I want to do the same thing with the bottom. I want to bring this Ultimate BMX Academy text up into the middle. So let's do the same thing. Type on a path. Type on a path options. And here, when I turn on preview, if I say, hey, just give me the ascender, you can see it does the same thing, but not really, because the text is upside down. But we have this option here called flip, and we can flip it. But what that means is we don't want to align to the path based on the ascender, but probably the descender, right? Or maybe even the baseline, just to move it away from the artwork a little bit more. And then we can hit OK and deselect. And just like that, you can quickly control and play with your type on a path much more easily. Yes, well, here we are in tip number 6, or up to tip number 6. I want to talk about the touch type tool. The hotkey is Shift and the letter T, but it is really just buried here at the bottom underneath your type tool. But the hotkey Shift T is probably the easiest way to go about doing it. We have this text. This is a font from Envato Elements as well. You can select on live text, like maybe the letter A here, and you can just straight up drag it around if you want, right? You can just drag it and say, hey, I want the A to move down here. And it's still live text now. I'm going to hit Command or Control Z to undo that. You can also, and maybe I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can really see this, you can make the type smaller, you can make the text bigger, you can grab the little dot and rotate it a little bit, you can do all kinds of crazy things, make it skinny, make it fat, make it short, make it tall. You can do a lot of different things, but you could quickly basically grab your text and begin moving things around and build out all kinds of funky text patterns. Now, probably really what you're going to use the touch type tool is more like, hey, I see optically there's a little issue with some of my text. I want to make an adjustment here or there. That's probably really how you're going to use this tool, but just know that you do have the ability to do all kinds of wild things. Now, one quick note I would like to make about this is when you click and drag, you can't hold down the Shift key and keep your text stuck to the baseline. Like I'm holding Shift now and see the text is still moving all over the place. So what's best is to click on a letter and then just use your arrow keys. And you can nudge text together or apart. And again, you can hold down Shift to move it apart quickly, or just don't hold Shift and just nudge it very gently. So the touch type tool, it can be great for going in and making quick optical adjustments to your type. This looks terrible, but the touch type tool can be very, very useful to do things that it can be kind of tricky to go in and just select one or two little letters and make adjustments that way. So it's a nice little tool, nice little feature to know about and to be able to use to bail you out when you may need it. So here we are up to tip number 7, kind of a beginner's tip, but really fun and really useful to just, again, think about, keep in your back pocket. Select a piece of artwork. Let's say we want to quickly create a bunch of copies of this so we can play with different colors or color schemes for this. Well, we can just grab the artwork, hold down Alt or Option like you normally would, and duplicate a copy of it. We'll then hit Command or Control D to repeat that duplication and move. Each time you hit Command or Control D, it's going to do that, but I'm not done yet. Grab the whole row, hold down Alt or Option again, drag this straight down, and then hit Command or Control D a couple times again. And just like that, we have 20 versions of our artwork, and each of these are totally individual. So you could go and grab them, maybe go into recolor artwork, whatever you want. It's a great way to quickly create a bunch of versions of, let's say, a logo, to try a bunch of different things before sending it off to a client and saying, hey, let me know what you think. All right, on to the next tip. So here's something that can be very useful here for tip number 8, and it is aligning to a key object, but fast. So we've got this little ellipse, and there's 4 pieces of artwork around it, kind of cyan, magenta, yellow, black. You see what I did there? And we want to throw this text into the middle of this ellipse. Elementary, right? You select it, you go align, bing, boom. Oh, but look what happens. It kind of aligns it to the selection and doesn't leave our ellipse perfectly right there in the artwork where we wanted it to be. So let's undo that. Here's what you do. You just grab the stuff you want to align and then click on the object that you want everything to align to. You don't have to shift click anything. So I just click the ellipse and it gets like a thicker selected line. And now I say, hey, align horizontal vertical centers, and the text is centered up with our ellipse. The ellipse never moves. So align to a key object just by simply selecting your object and then click on the one little object you want to be the key object, and boom, 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 boom. Make all your alignment adjustments and it'll be perfect. All right, For tip number 9, I want to talk about path smoothing. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but kind of each of the different ways does it a little bit differently than another. So first things first, let's grab our line here that's all jaggy and kind of a mess. And we can, first of all, smooth the lines that we draw by going Object, Path, Simplify. Our little Simplify doodad comes up. We just say, hey, make it as simple as possible, down to 20 points, and there's what it's done. Frankly, not that great. But I don't want to poo-poo Object Simplify, or Object Path Simplify, I should say, because it does do a great job very, very often. But there's some other options you have. And one of the other options I want to talk about here is the Smooth tool right here. Underneath the Shaper tool, underneath the Pencil tool, there is the Smooth tool. So we can select that. You can double click it and just say, hey, I want it to be max smoothness. Okay, great. Well, when we have the Smooth tool, before we even use it, you want to select the object which you would like to smooth, which of course in this case is this line. So then I would select the line, then I hit the Smooth tool, and you can do anything you want. You basically just trace back over the path, but you can just say, look, I want to trace over the first part of this path, and look at that, it really needs to be 3 simple points. Or I can say, look, I want to just make this whole path much smoother. And check it out. We immediately just smooth out the entire path just like that. But that's not it. Over here, we've done this, where we've kind of done these rough traces around our astronaut. And let me just delete like the basketball circle, or ellipse, I should say, so I can show you kind of what I'm doing here. So I've got the Pencil tool, and I'm just making kind of these rough shapes around this artwork underneath. If I double click on the Pencil tool, you can see up will pop my Pencil tool options. And this is kind of like my quick outline Pencil tool option set, where I like a lot of accuracy, and I know that I'm probably gonna need to smooth it later. Maybe you go right to a lot of smoothness. I don't, because I wanna be able to maintain corners where I want them. But here's what I also do. I don't wanna fill it with anything, right? So I don't fill new pencil strokes, but I do wanna keep it selected. And I do wanna keep it selected because there's this other option here. Use the Option key. On Windows, this will be the Alt key to toggle to the Smooth tool. Interesting. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm going to just draw around the basketball, and I'll be intentionally kind of jaggy and, wavy a little bit. There we go. Something like so. Pretty messy for the basketball. But if I hold down Alt or Option, I can say, hey, give me a smoother ball. Yeah, give me smoother up there, smoother down around here. And I can just, I'm holding down my Option key, right? If this would be the Alt key if you're on Windows. And I'm just painting over and very, very quickly just smoothing out just a quick sketch that I made. And now we get a nice, still semi-hand-drawn look, but using that Alt or Option key with the Pencil tool, you can come in here and quickly smooth out all these different shapes, right? So if I come in here and I grab his arm and I'm like kind of a mess, I could use the Pencil tool, hold down the Alt or Option key and just say, look, smooth that, smooth this along here, smooth this here in the backside, and just like that, get a much smoother, simplified shape. By the way, much more effective to do this kind of smoothing and simplifying than Object Path Simplify. Sometimes Object Path Simplify works incredibly. Sometimes with shapes like this, it doesn't work nearly as well as you would hope it works. So it'll be a matter of knowing that you can do this and going in and doing it this way. By the way, another quick tip, with the Paintbrush tool, you can also hold down Alt or Option and go in and use the Smooth tool. So holding down Alt or Option with the pencil, if you have it turned on, or the Paintbrush tool. Now I do a lot of my line work with the pencil, but hey, to each his own. If you prefer the brush tool and you use that for a lot of what you do, you also have the Smooth tool at your disposal. So the Smooth tool, very, very useful and helpful in Adobe Illustrator. All right, tip number 10, groups of colors, and more specifically, creating color groups that are global colors. So we're gonna grab our artwork here, and I'm gonna open up my swatches panel. In fact, I'm gonna drag my swatches out here. Again, we're gonna hit this hamburger menu and choose New Color Group. Here we have the option. Yep, we want to create it from our selected artwork, and also important, we want to convert process to global. We want global colors. Hit OK. Here it is. We've got all these 9 or 10 colors. We've got the little white tick in the corner. It's a global color. They're all global colors. Now, something cool here is we've used all of these colors. Like we know all the red we have here is all of this very bright red. Now I've used this red here. It's filling in the bike. It's in this stroke gradient in the background, and it's also in our gradient bar. Now if I double click on the red here in the swatches panel, up pops my swatch options. I'm going to turn on preview, and I could do something like, hey, make this pink. And look at that, it all updates. And the importance of this is it not only updates a fill, it updates strokes, it updates gradients that are strokes that are a gradient. Like this is a stroke that has simply been filled with a gradient color, and it is within a more complex blend object that contains this kind of ribbed artwork here on the background of our little composite here. I'm going to hit OK. We could say, hey, the yellow, I want to change that. So that's going to be this yellow, right? The rainy space, that's live text. So if we hit preview and we make this maybe more of a light green, that's interesting. Maybe we want it to be more pink or orange, something like that. Maybe something brighter orange. That's kind of cool. Maybe we want something that's more yellowy. Yeah, maybe something like that is cool. And then we could go to the light blue color. So that's this light blue color. Again, we'll preview it. And maybe we want this to be more of like a white with maybe a slight pink tone, something like that. Maybe it needs to be a little bit brighter. Maybe we'll push it back more toward the just full-on, straight-up, solid white color like that. The point is, you can grab all your artwork and set yourself up throughout your entire project to be able to very quickly target colors and change them, and they will change all throughout your artwork, whether it's a fill, a stroke, a gradient, you name it. It works for all kinds of colors in your Illustrator document. All right, here we are into tip number 11. We're going to talk about the Puppet Warp tool. It's pretty straightforward, and it's mostly useless, but when it's helpful, it's really helpful. So I'm going to grab my artwork here. It's a big group of artwork. I'm going to select Puppet Warp. Illustrator is going to say, whoa, you've selected a really complex piece of artwork. Give me a second here. My computer's also a little slower than I would like it to be. But I've got these default points. It says, hey, like elbows are here, maybe hips are here, and a neck is here. And you can also then say like, hey, I probably want to put a point down here on both the knees. Maybe also out here on the weight, because maybe we want to say, hey, he's lifting something that's really heavy, and then we just drag that point and bend the weight down, just like that. Cool. And then maybe we select this point up here, and we move the top of the illustration, maybe stretch it over here to the right. So this is really what Puppet Warp is good for. Not really making huge wholesale changes, but I find that it's most useful for me when I've created kind of some complex artwork and I need to go and just kind of shift everything one way, right? So instead of having to redraw all the highlights and shadows here in the space outfit, I can just kind of shimmy and shift everything one way or the other. Would I make a really complex change like bending the dumbbells for artwork that I'm really delivering for a project? Probably not, but for just shifting things a little bit this way or that way, if I need to squeeze something into another area, don't sleep on the Puppet Warp tool for that. It can be really helpful and really save you a ton of time. All right, and then finally, for our 12th tip today, it's free distort, but better. You may have been acquainted with the effect Distort, Transform, Free Distort, which gives you this little dialogue, which is kind of difficult to use, right? You just get this outline. You got to kind of guess where everything is going. The one good thing about this is that when you hit OK, it applies it as an appearance, but that also can just seem more complicated to you if you don't understand how to work with appearances and what's going on here, yada, yada, yada. But if you just want to quickly take something and be able to distort and transform it that way, might I suggest the free transform tool. And the best way to get to the free transform tool is just by hitting the letter E, and you get your free transform tool. Now, I do have to say, using the free transform tool is not applying an appearance, so it is going to take and twist and mangle your artwork. So if you're not quite sure, just take that layer and drag it down to the new layer icon and just tuck it away. I just shut it off. We have a copy of our artwork that we can go back to when inevitably we totally foul this up. Now you get this little toolbar that pops out that says, hey, I've got some tools here. You can lock the artwork, the proportions. Right now we're just using the standard, hey, scale this artwork left, right, center tool. You can grab the sides, you can skew them up or down, push them in or out, a lot of great things. But these bottom two features are the two that can be really helpful when you need them. You can grab the corner of your artwork and do big perspective adjustments like this, right? It can be super duper helpful. Then grab your free transform again, say, hey, we want to just tuck this side in like so, and then deselect, and you've done this kind of thing with your artwork. Now, if you're working on maybe a big illustration where you're adding a piece of flat artwork into maybe like a 3D world or like an isometric world, something like that, you can also create a grid, just group it with your artwork, and then use free transform, and that grid will give you kind of some perspective lines for artwork like this that is just this ellipse. Now going back to free transform, you also have just kind of a free distort tool on the bottom where you can do all kinds of crazy wacky changes and really take and twist and mangle your artwork exactly the way you think it needs to go, depending on what exactly you are doing with it. And you can see I've taken all that artwork and just twisted it around and done all this with it. Yeah, the free transform tool. So those are 12 tips that I think you're really going to love. They're going to save you a bunch of time and be useful for all sorts of illustration and logo design applications in Adobe Illustrator. They're some of my favorite new features and some features that I've used for a little bit of time now. Hope you've really enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around and checking this video out and watching all the way till the end. Follow me over on Instagram if you haven't already. We got hacked about, well, a year ago now, but I just started a new Instagram and it's small now, but we're building. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like this video, all the normal YouTube stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's it for this one. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.